All right, happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome to our NoCodeOps live community show. I hope you're doing well, whether you're watching us now live across all our platforms or whether you'll be watching us in the future. If this is your first time here, we're NoCodeOps community, an international community for operators, so people working in operations roles and leveraging the power of no-code tools to scale up their career. So great to see Philip and Jared in the chat. Hi, guys. Great to have you here. And so today is a very special event because we've all noticed, Fillout, the new tool coming into our community with a bang, because everyone has been talking about Fillout in the past couple of weeks. And so, of course, we had to invite them in. We had to give you kind of show you how this tool can be integrated with some of our favorite tools, and in this case, Airtable. So today's guest speaker, Dan Leeman, I'm gonna bring him on stream. Hi, Dan. Great to have you here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Claudia.
Super excited because I know that you're a bit of a celebrity out there. I've been watching your videos about no code, and I'm so honored that you're here with us today with the community. And before we get started talking about Fillout, which obviously we're all very excited about, can you tell us a little bit more about you, your background? How did you get into no code, and what are you working on these days?
Yeah, great question. So I've had kind of a long journey in the no code and automation world. I actually started off my career as a teacher. I was a music teacher in public schools. And so I think a lot of us find our way into this space through different means. And I always found myself in every stage of my career automating things. So I had a music database of everything I was doing with my students. And then I broke into the world of sales and technology, and I was automating our sales pipeline and our lead generation strategies. And so all, kind of through my career, I guess I've been adding on new tools into my tool set for this. But I worked at an AI company most recently. We got acquired by Zoom, led a professional services team there. And since then, I started to think like, hey, I've been building all this no code stuff for a long time. Let's go out on my own. So I started a company called Automation Helpers, and we've been providing services to automate business processes for small businesses over the past about 6 months now.
That's fantastic. And it's great to hear that you used to be in education. That's also my background. I used to work at a primary school. So look at all these teachers shining
Very
through
cool.
the no code space. And I can see some people in the chat as well. Sentiments of Grace. I was a
Whoa,
band
small
director
world.
too.
That's
Brandy
awesome.
Bullock. Hi, Brandy. Yeah, that's fantastic. And in terms of your automation agency, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So what I found is that there's a lot of companies out there who like really focus on business process, or they really focus on the technical side. And we found kind of this intersection of both worlds. I've been working with some of my colleagues from my past life to be able to really scale up our technical side. So I do a lot of integration building. But then you need someone who can dig in and really understand the business. And I was just taking a look at our client list, and I was like, we only have 2 or 3 clients that are in the same industry. And that's what I think is so cool about no code, is that it's just so pervasive, right? All these different kinds of companies are saying, hey, we've got citizen developers, we've got ways that we want to be able to scale this up, and we don't want to have a whole team of developers to have to manage our internal operations. And as we feel like the economic winds shifting and that kind of stuff with smaller budgets, it's just pretty cool to see what teams can build themselves and bring us into to help build out as well.
Fantastic. And we were chatting a little bit about a course that you're preparing as well. What's that
Yeah,
all about?
happy to talk about that. So the topic that we're focused on today is about fill out forms, and specifically we're talking about using it with Airtable, because I know a lot of us in the community are Airtable users as well. But we've been using this so much with our clients that I was like, instead of creating video after video after video and then just kind of disseminating that information, I just decided to put together a course. This is entirely free. I'm not going to like upcharge you for anything. So I'm putting together a course right now. We're going to launch next week. If you like what you're seeing with Fillout today and you want to sign up for the course, actually you can, as I share my screen, you'll be able to see that I'm using Fillout to collect your information. So if you want to fill out the form, we'll launch next week. And this is going to have a lot of these use cases that we're talking about today.
Link below. All right. So speaking of Fillout and Airtable, should I bring in your screen and should we get started?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We're all very excited here because I can see people in the chat already saying like a lot of Fillout, excited, pumped. So, and I can tell you, like in the community, it was the first thread that opened up in our forum. You know, as soon as it came out, it's like, oh, Fillout, and we've been exploring every week, having these live events. Like I often say, there's always a new tool every week, every day. I get up and there's a new tool, but I haven't seen so much traction as for Fillout. So I'm very excited to see how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to start with some of the basics, but I think, Claudia, why there's been such a great reception is because, Dominic and Anthony, as they were putting together Fillout, it's basically like they went down the list of every single complaint that people have with Airtable native forms. And I love Airtable. I mean, Airtable's spectacular, but we all know that their forms could use a little bit of love and attention. And so when they went down that list and just started knocking out like, hey, better way to deal with linked records, how we can prefetch data, how we can have branding that you'd expect to have. I think that's what makes Fillout really cool with Airtable. So today, we're just going to walk through a whole bunch of different examples to really get in the product. We're going to start off simple because some of you might be using Fillout for the first time or you haven't even heard of it. So we're going to start from the top here. Right now, you see I'm logged. You can see my screen okay? Yep, we're good. All right, so we're inside of Fillout. This is our workspace where we're creating forms. You can see this one's green. You can actually have quizzes too, which is kind of a cool feature, especially if you want to use it for some lead gen type activities. Really, the main thing we need to do here is create a new form. And we see three different options available to us. I think when you're first getting started, an awesome option is to go with a template, because these are already cooked up with use cases. You can see e-commerce examples, you can see employee onboarding examples. So I find that really helpful when we're starting with clients and they can just pick out an existing one. You also, but typically I find that like once you get familiar with it, you're typically building it from scratch or you've created your own template. You don't need to choose from an existing one at that point. But we're going to spend most of the time today talking about our integration with Airtable. So you can go ahead and click on connect, and they actually have a bunch of different options available. So we're going to obviously choose Airtable for right now, but you can click and see additional options, and they seem like they're integrating with a new no-code tool every few weeks here. So if you're using Notion, I know that's one of the newer ones. Smart Suite just released a couple of weeks ago. So let's go ahead and click on Airtable. We're just going to choose a really basic theme right here. This is a plain theme, which is going to feel reminiscent probably of Airtable, but we'll jazz it up a little bit. We'll go ahead and click on next, and this is where we're going to set up our connection to Airtable. I already have this set up. In reality, you're probably going to only need one connection to Airtable, unless for some reason you're connecting to multiple workspaces or something like that. But you can go ahead and add a new connection. I'm just going to call that test Airtable, but it really doesn't matter what you call it. We connect to Airtable. And then this is actually cool. They're using the new OAuth flow here. So for those of you kind of on the nerdier side of doing some development stuff, you don't have to find the API key for this. This is just connecting. So I'm already authenticated inside of Airtable, and it's just recognizing that. And I can choose, we could give just limited access to a specific base, or I could say, hey, give it access to everything. That's really up to you from a security standpoint of what you want to allow. And then boom, we're already connected. So now I can choose from my bases that I have. I've set up just a really basic example today. I'm actually putting all my tables in here so they don't all interact with each other, but just for our examples, we've got one called Fillout Demo. So I'm just going to search for my Fillout Demo, and then we'll choose from an existing table here. And I'm going to choose my contacts table. And so for our first example, we'll just do the most obvious use case, just a web submission that we might have on a contact form. Let's go ahead and create that form. And then we'll call this contact submissions, presumably something we'd have on a website. Great. So we're already connected. And the first thing is that this is so cool. So many other form tools, you have to create the fields that you want. And then you have to say, okay, now I'm going to map this over to my fields that I have inside of Airtable. And this is something that just works out of the box. So when we connected to our contacts table, all of the fields that I have inside of my contacts, those are now all available as fields that I can just choose from this drag and drop UI. So I can add in my first name. Hey, look, what about half width fields? Great. We've got some more options that we typically don't have. We'll put on our email address. Maybe we're asking for a phone, and we'll ask them, how can we help? So really easy to get up and running with this. Now, you'll probably notice that there's other display elements here. And this is what's really fun, is being able to actually put in contextual information. You want to add a video, you want to add images. This is the stuff that people, with Airtable, we get a little bit frustrated that we can't do some of those things. And we'll talk
I was
about
just about to ask you, I was just about to say, so just with the first couple of fields, where do you see the difference, or I guess the extra superpower compared to the Airtable form? But there you go. The ability to embed a video, it's awesome.
Oh yeah, videos and images, but I mean all sorts of crazy stuff. Like we were talking with a client this morning, and they're filling in work orders on a job site, and they want to kind of validate that their user is on site, the person who's doing the job. And there's actually a field type for grabbing your GPS coordinates. So I mean,
wow.
There's a ton of options here. Some of them are in beta. You can grab things like signatures. So maybe you want to be able to put on a full document here and have people sign. Lots of different embeds. So plenty of different things, even some encryption around social security numbers and things like that as well.
What about the logic? Does he have a logic as well, like conditional logic?
Yes, lots of conditional logic. Obviously, Airtable's got some conditional logic, but we're going to actually dig into some specific examples around that. So that's a great question, Claudia. So at this point, we've got the most basic of forms, but most people say, okay, well, what can I do to make this feel better? We've got kind of our gray background and standard things like that. Yeah, Philip, all those other fields, we can collect them. Some of them we can sync to Airtable. We could have fields that don't sync to Airtable. Lots of options. Let me click on the theme designer here. And some of these are upgraded features, but we could change essentially the coloring on our form, right? We want to be able to put in a call to action that's a different color. Great. We want to have custom fonts. You can actually drop in your own Google custom font link, or we could choose one that matches our website. So our website uses Inter. We could select that. A logo, let's put that on here. I'm going to upload one. Let me just search for one that I've got here. And when we add the logo, it actually persists between pages. And some of you are like, pages? We don't have pages in Airtable. Yes, you've got your multi-part, multi-page forms. The logo will stay static between those different pages. But I think one of the best features is this positioning. So we could say, let's jazz it up a little bit. Let's add a splash of color to this. We've got
this is giving me a little bit of Typeform vibes. So it's like a Typeform embellished Airtable with more functions.
Exactly. Yeah. And I honestly think the best parts about Fillout are around some of the logic and what we can do with linked records. But I think it's just fun to set the stage for everybody that we don't have to always use the gray background and our white little box and everything else too.
I love a good customization.
Add a splash of color. You want it to look a little bit more like Notion. You can change the format here. So lots of different ways to get that to show. And then we'll be done changing our theme here. So there is our basic form. We can publish this. This will make it available. I like the little confetti action, kind of reminiscent of Monday and some other tools here. Pop open our link. And now we've got our form to fill out. So we can fill it out. We've got different validation logic. So it'll detect if it's an email and things like that. Fill out. We'll submit it. And then right away, that's going to create that new record inside of our Airtable form. And that's all there is to it, right? You can get up and running with Airtable and Fillout in a matter of probably 2 minutes. You saw how quick that was if I wasn't talking so much over here.
No, that's fantastic. That's amazing. I love how it's taking kind of all the best features, as you're saying, of different tools, and kind of creating a solution as well for some of the limitations that Airtable's forms used to have, or still have. So yeah, we couldn't see you filling in the form, but
Oh, really?
yeah, just because it
Oh,
was
because it's just
still
sharing.
showing. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
but
I'll make sure to switch the tab here. Let's see. So where I can share my
you can share
whole
your window if you want. But
yeah.
I guess, all that we missed is just you inputting some information in the form.
Got it. Let me
So
do this just for my other examples that we can see. We've got the whole
sure.
window going now, I think. Oh, maybe
I
we
can see your fill outs right now.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I will try to switch the tab instead when we're on there. Okay. So at this point, let's talk about some of that conditional logic. And one of those things would be, let's say we've got some information we're collecting on our website and we want to kind of see if this project is going to be a good fit for us. So we're gauging based off of a prospect's budget for a project. As we talked about briefly, we can see we've got multiple different pages that we can create. So we've got different areas of collecting input. It's not all jammed into one page. As I click in this one, this is really cool. You can connect to Calendly, right? So if you want to be able to pass people through questions, and then if they answer the questions a certain way, pass them onto your Calendly link, you've got those options. You can see when we add pages, you've got quite a few choices. Form is where we collect our information. We could have a cover page that just displays without collecting any information. This one is our scheduling for Calendly. You can even collect payments with Stripe. So you can build a full out e-commerce type collection tool if you want people to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of different choices with the pages that we have. But by default, when we've got these different pages, they just go linearly, one page after another after another. But in this example, we don't want just everybody to be able to book time on a calendar, right? We want to say if their budget is above a certain point, then let's book a call. If not, we're going to follow up and ask them some questions, and then we'll have them submit the form, but we're not going to have them access our calendar right away. So we'll show that page. So we can click on this logic area down here. And inside of logic, this is where we set up the flow of our pages. So we've got our project budget and questions and scheduling and ending. But in this case, let's start with project budget. Our default is to go to that project questions. But let's add some conditional logic. If their budget here, so we'll click into our options. So if our project budget is going to be greater than $3,000, then we're going to show them the scheduling page. They'll get to connect to that. And if not, they're going to go to project questions. Now, project questions we have going to scheduling, but we don't want that. We just want them to submit the form at that point. So we could go to our project questions and we could say, nope, project questions should go straight to the ending here. So we're able to set up this logic to follow that flow based on the actual inputs of the user and what they're choosing there.
That's amazing, and everyone can do that. It's part of the free plan. It's okay.
Yep, the logic itself is part of the free plan. Obviously take a look at the pricing page because there are certain things. Part of it's based on number of submissions. Part of it's certain upgraded features, like you could see that the Calendly link is part of upgraded features. So I'll leave that decision between you and certainly there's lots of
budget
and your budget and the Fillout website. But I do find that even their business plan, especially if it's something that you're using quite a bit, is pretty affordable because it's not based on the per user model that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nathan was saying from the chat, I didn't think something like forms could be shockingly better, but there it is.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. It's like our clients have used all sorts of different form builders, right? There's a ton. You were mentioning Typeform, there's JotForm, there's lots of different options. But as we get into some of these use cases, it's pretty brilliant how well integrated it is with Airtable. And in fact, I want to talk about how we do calculations with these forms too, because this is a big part of this. Let me go over to our another example here that we have. This is going to be an e-commerce based example. This one is actually based on a template that they have out of the box. So if you kind of want to follow along, you certainly can. You choose this flower form that we have. And the idea here between with calculations in Fillout. If you think about Airtable, you've got your Airtable formulas, and that's what gives you the power to be able to add numbers or concatenate text or do things like that. That's kind of the equivalent of calculations inside of Fillout. The difference being, most of the time when we're inside of Airtable and you have a formula, that's based on like the record's already been saved and you've got different data points within that record and it's adding them together. This calculation is happening before it ever submits that record into Airtable. So the user could be filling in a value and it could be adding it up behind the scenes. And then at the end, we're going to send it to Stripe to tell them the total price. That's kind of the use case that we're showing here. So I've got my flower order form and you can choose between flowers. This is another great field type on here, like Philip was referencing, is you've got the ability to have images with a picker, way more options, make a nice UI here. And we've got the user who's choosing the kinds of leaves that they want. So we've got different selections for the user. And presumably each of these comes at a different price point, right? So we want to be able to tell the user how much they're actually going to spend. We click on the base here and we can choose with our options and our settings over on the side. If you go into advanced, we can select custom values for each of these. So I'm telling it that white roses are $30.99. I'm adding a dollar value for each of these options. Now, some of you are probably wondering, can we do something similar with linked records? You absolutely can, but you don't even have to use linked records in this regard if you don't want to. Leaves, same deal. We've got some pricing information on this over on the side. So our goal is to be able to send that information onto the user. And then I've created a subtotal page where we've got our calculation. So let me show you how we build a calculation. If we click on our logic, and then instead of the page logic, this is very linear, we can click into calculations. And we can create any of these calculations. Again, very similar to Airtable's formulas. We're going to say started at 0. And then if that choosing the flower type, if that value is not empty, we're going to add that value. And then same thing with the leaves. If that's not empty, we're going to add that value. And then this part blew my mind with Airtable forms with Fillout forms, because with Airtable, we can't really personalize stuff, right? You can't have a label that references some other value. But take a look at this. You use your @ symbol here, and that's going to be able to pull values from wherever you want. You could pull it from one of these pages, from a value that a user's inputted. You could pull from URL parameters. So you could pass something via the browser when they click on the link. We could do that from our calculations. That's what we did in this case, because we selected our price that we just constructed here. That shows there. We could do it based on your logged in status. You could log into Airtable and we could pull information from your contact record and put it there. So what ends up happening is we publish this form. I'm going to try to switch so that you can actually see what I'm doing here. Let me share this tab. There we go. And
Yep.
I want to place the order now.
Nathan is moved. Nathan is crying. Like, it's so beautiful.
Let's choose our white roses and we want to put it on lemon leaf and take us to our subtotal. And these are all of those computed values. So you can reference all this information now, display it to your user before you ever get to, your shipping, your checkout, all that kind of stuff. Conditional logic right here inside of Fillout.
That's fantastic. And as you're saying, like, there's probably going to be like a convoluted way on how to do that in Airtable, or like different linking records and all that. It might take a lot of brain work, but actually it's so simple and visually beautiful to just do it on Fillout, and it integrates so beautifully with it that, it's so great. I'm wondering, like, because you're also kind of showing features that could work really well for a website, or like you were saying, like an e-commerce. Is Fillout able to publish on a domain, or do you just publish the form?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if I head back into Fillout, we've got different options to be able to display this where we want it. So I've just been using the link, just like there's a link for the Fillout.
Oh, I can see custom domain. Yep.
Yeah, you could do a custom domain. So I could have this be forms.automationhelpers.com. So we get that aspect of branding. And actually in the course, we talk about lots of different ways that we can do branding. But what's really neat is they're exploring different kinds of embed codes. So you might want to actually embed this on your page, but instead of just being our standard form, you might want to have it be triggered as a pop-up. So someone clicks a link and then the form opens up as a pop-up actually on your site. So if you want to render this as a contact form on your site, match your branding, have a pop-up or have it slide in, lots of different choices that way.
Fantastic. And speaking of people being excited about Fillout, I can see Phil has joined us in the studio, and so I'm just gonna pull him in. Obviously, people here in our community, you obviously know Philip Lakin, our CEO at NoCodeOps. So hi, Phil. Welcome.
Hello.
Hey.
Good to join y'all. I gotta tell you, I like getting emotional about forms is something that I didn't think I'd be doing today, but man, am I over here getting emotional. It's amazing.
I feel ya. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to join because I had some questions even on this and like some other questions on use cases that I wanted to run by you. And would love to hear your thoughts. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Shoot.
Sweet. So, one of the reasons that we, on the NoCodeOps site, right, that we opted to use the Webflow native forms, which have their own, don't get me wrong, they're beautiful. They each have their own issues. And, every time I want an update, I've got to go to our Webflow dev, right? And I'd rather just be able to do that on our own one day. Like, but I do like how beautiful and native it feels when that pop out happens in Webflow, right? Like, how would you replicate something like this, like feeling really native on like a Webflow site or on a site, whether with like pop up or sidebar, and making it feel native?
Yeah, I mean, so one, I would encourage just exploring some of these embed options because it does simulate some of that feel, right? Like it's right within the page as opposed to being like, oh, I click a link and it takes me to a new page. So I think to some degree there's that. Of course, if you wanted to go the no code route and be able to like code how we render the form and pull it in an iframe, you could probably do that. But I think what they've been doing here is pretty innovative in terms of, it's not typically you have your two options, like either share a link or just embed it on the page. And what I'm guessing that we'll see some continued experimentation in this area for different embed types to make it feel like it's part of that flow inside of other native tools.
Awesome. Cool. And then, what's so interesting is I recently even just used, like we have when people come and fill out our forms on our website, right? We create them in Airtable as like a form submission. And then we link that to a contact record, right? Which we just did a whole series on. We actually built our CRM in public, right? Where we did all this on Airtable with Gareth from Gap Consulting. And one thing I'm using now Fillout for is in our interfaces, we literally have a button that says, oh, you want to create a manual contact? Go ahead and create it. And it'll automatically create all these other objects for you. And we do that with Fillout right from interfaces. So I've been a big fan. I'll also say that one of the things that I know that a lot of no-coders struggle with here is like, if you have a form that has multi-select options on it, and then that is passing data to Airtable into another multi-select field. Today, if you're doing that outside of Airtable forms and you're using Google Forms type, whatever, right? Yeah. The second you change options in one of those places, they're out of sync. And I love that here they stay in sync because you're actually using the Airtable field.
Exactly. And that's the crazy part about what they're doing so much through the API, right? So even the way that like when we talk about URL parameters for forms in Airtable, like, yeah, you can have it linked to a record behind the scenes from URL parameters. But what Fillout's doing is like you put in that URL parameter of that record ID, and it's going to scoop back all the other information about that record from the API for things like being able to do full updates and whatnot. And so I mean, the direction they're going in terms of actually pulling back the data and not just saying like, connect these two things. This field goes with that field. That field goes with that field. Yep. I mean, it saves so much time.
Oh, and Jared's saying you can also add a single select option. Yeah, like single select, multi-select, like that's incredible that for the first time, outside of Airtable forms, you can have a place where like your options are dynamically staying in sync, which is mind-blowing. Because I know for me, every time that I don't do that, right, and I use a Google form or something, I have to then remind myself to manually go and update every time I have an update. So I have a question on that front, or separate front for you on the Fillout use case front. So one thing I've always wanted, right, that I have trouble doing with Airtable natively is, let's say I have a group of users. I have like a segment of users, right? And I want to email all of them a form that they can fill out that does two things. One, it doesn't ask them for superfluous information we already know about them. So I don't have to ask people again, fill out your name, fill out your email, fill out this, fill out this. But also it then links back whenever. So let's say I just want to ask 2 questions, right? Like an NPS score or something. And then I want it to come back and link to that contact that it is related to, right? So I don't want them to have to fill it out again to match it on that. And I want it to match up based on how I'm sending out with those unique links that each person would get. How would I achieve that with Fillout?
Yeah, great question. So I'm probably not going to build the whole thing on the fly, but there's kind of 2 aspects to it. So one, and I'll show this in a moment here, but we've got the ability to do updates to records behind the scenes, which is actually just a nice little configuration setting, right? We can click in our integrations in the Airtable. Oh, well, I don't know why we're resyncing it here. That's kind of weird. Oh, because I'm on a new one. Let me head back to my example I created here. Yeah, so if we click into Airtable here, we can choose to update that record, right? So one thing that we could do is we could choose from an existing record. It's going to update, and it's actually going to pull back their previous responses as an option here. So we could go ahead and update that. That gives you the formula, but it's actually going to pull back their phone number and previous questions and stuff that you've asked them. We can also have it create that relationship with a linked record, which if there is a way to pass either the record ID or we could have it prefetch it based off of their email address. So I'll show an example of how we prefetch that too. We can actually have that link to that contact record behind the scenes. The user doesn't even have to know about it because we're sending it in the URL parameters. And then however you get that to them, be it, it's email marketing,
mail merge or whatever. Yeah,
mail merge that field or whatever. That's how we can send it to them.
Unreal. That's incredible. Because one thing I've always wanted to do is just be able to like push a button and like get a new piece of data on a whole set of users where all they're doing is answering 1 or 2 questions, not, give me your name again, give me your email so we can key off that. Like, so annoying. And then they misspell it, or it's annoying for both sides. So this is great.
Oh, totally. Well, let's go a step further. Philip, did you have other questions? I thought I could.
No. That was the biggest one. So keep going, man.
Okay.
Let's keep dreaming.
All right. You got it. So let's keep going with this example then. Let's go ahead and copy what this formula that we're getting from Airtable. And I'm going to come into...
We can't see your new screen. Okay, now we can.
Yep. Yeah. I'm just switching between it because for some reason sharing my screen is being a little bit off here. So I'm going to add a new field. We're just going to call this updates, and we'll create a formula. And then we'll stick in what it gave us to create this. Now, it is important that when you're switching this over to updates, make sure that you publish the form, or it's not going to have any idea what to do with that information.
Yeah.
So reminder.
Yeah, exactly. So we publish this. Let's pull this open here. And let's see.
I think Tally Forms has that kind of reminder, like to publish, like before you leave the window, it says, oh, careful, you haven't published.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's try one more time here.
Yeah, don't worry about the switch. Sometimes, because I'm assuming you're sharing one tab, so you have to switch between the two.
Yeah. Oh, yes. 1 second. Okay.
Yeah, and to all the people, watching on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, I'm guessing as well, feel free to drop your questions in the chat because we want this event to be interactive. So I know that we have some time for Q&A at the end, but as you can see, we already started asking some questions. So feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll ask them for you.
Okay, so Sorry, this was kind of happening behind the scenes here. Unfortunately, you can't see my URL, but my URL from here passed the record ID for this individual record. So we'd already done just like a basic form submission. This is now doing an update. And so the ability, I mean, you can pass in a record ID in Airtable. That's not an issue. But normally you would have to tell it like, pull this data and then pre-fill, pull and pre-fill, pull and pre-fill. But if Philip's got like, hey, here's 10 questions you already answered, update your contact information, I'm going to ask you 2 more questions. We could have these additional fields, or we could hide some of those, and they could make any updates to this so that it's one existing contact record.
You can even control things that you allow them to update, but also get net new. So they can both update and do net new, and you can hide or get rid of anything that you don't want them to touch.
Exactly. Because I mean, think about it. You could even build out a new form or build a second page to it. It's kind of like the idea of views in Airtable, right? Like we only show certain fields in a view. This other view, we show other fields. So you've got a lot of options there to be able to collect that new information and be able to update our existing information as well.
So good. One other question for me on that front is, when selecting records, one of the problems that I've had, and I can't remember if Airtable solved this since this time or not, but when people are selecting from linked records, I don't want them to see everything about that linked record. I maybe only want them to see 1 element or 2 elements from that linked record. Is that control able here as well to be done?
Yep, exactly. So this ties pretty well. I did want to talk about linked records a little bit, because that's one of those things in Airtable that, you know, we don't have quite the full functionality sometimes that we're looking for. So let me choose an example. I've got a pickleball one floating around here. I'm a huge pickleball fan. So we're going to pretend we're a little pickleball store here today. And if we look inside of Airtable, I've got these other tables that I have. I have orders. And, you know, if you do quite a bit with Airtable, you've probably heard that concept thrown around of junction tables or association entities. So we want the user to be able to purchase multiple products. So we've got orders, but then we have order lines, which have our quantities that we're actually purchasing of a product. And then we have the products themselves, the manufacturer, the image of the product, all that kind of information. So if I come back to Fillout, what we can do is, you know, users don't get the concept of order lines. I retitled this to what would you like to order today? And this is a linked record. And if I click on this, we've got some settings. And this is really cool, the kinds of things that we can choose. So in this case, we want the user to be able to make multiple purchases. We'll select multiple. We want them to create new records because, and in fact, we only want them to create new records. Because if you think about it, we don't want to like have them select existing order lines from someone else's order. Like they just want to create new order lines. And then we can edit what this experience looks like. So we can say, oh, now we're on our order line. Here's what the product looks like and the quantity. Here's the fields that we want within that. And then this is our lookup to our product, our linked record to our product. So if we click on this, I think this will answer your question, Philip. We can actually configure which fields we want to be able to show from that linked record. And then, I mean, if you have not seen this before, hopefully this blows your mind, you know, just a little bit here. Let's go ahead and...
Jared is asking, what is the name field there that you're using?
Oh, the name is just it's the primary field. It's the name of the product that was showing there. Oh, on the right-hand side. If you're looking at the center part of the screen, the hidden field, that was linking back to our parent order. So we were on the order lines, and it was linking to the order, if that makes sense. Let me show you what this looks like, right? Oh, am I showing the right? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I add a product. Look how cool this is. So you can have images display. You can show the manufacturer. You could show a field saying that it's out of stock or in stock. And in fact, if it's out of stock, we could filter out those results. We could say, just show active products where it's in stock so that we're not selling something if we don't have it in stock. I mean, just the crazy amount of flexibility you have around linked records. I kind of want to save this for the end because this is the powerful stuff. Yeah, branding, logos. Okay, that's awesome. But how we interact with linked records, I think, is really kind of the secret sauce here.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So good. Yeah, is there any questions from the audience? Like, I'm just like, my jaw's on the ground.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I just wanted to check with Dan. Dan, did you have any more use cases you wanted to show?
I've got one more that I could show if that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Or we
sure,
could go in the
sure.
Q&A, whatever you'd like to do. Happy
Let's
to.
do one more so that people can start thinking about their questions and start dropping them in the chat. And if not, I have
Alright.
some in the form.
Great.
Feed to
Okay.
you.
Well, this last example, we talked about linked records. This is kind of a continuation, but it's this idea of prefetching data. And I remember the first time I heard about prefetching data, I was like, well, what kind of use case would I want for that? It's kind of a weird concept to talk about. So let me show you a little bit here. This is going to be using this idea of work orders. And if I take a look, a work order, something broke in an apartment, we want to fix it, right? That's the idea of the work order here. And let's pretend that we had a customer portal. Let's say you're using Softer. It's pulling from your Airtable data, but you're logged into Softer, and then you've got a form. And in this case, we want to pass via URL parameter your email. Set up our own URL parameters. And
Oh, can you hear him, Phil?
No, we just lost your audio for a second.
No.
Yeah, we lost
There
you
we
for a
go. Now
couple
you're
of
back.
seconds. Yeah.
Oh, I'm back?
Yep,
you're back
It
now.
must just be the streaming or something. Yeah. Okay. Well, sorry. Hopefully we're still together here.
Yeah.
I was just saying we've got URL parameters and we can send over any data that we want. So in this case, we're sending an email address. And then if I come back to the form, we've got the ability to say, hey, we want to pull Dan's contact information because we know it's Dan. It's one thing in Airtable, yeah, we could link to a contact record. But get this, if I come into my integrations, Airtable, we can prefetch and we can say, hey, if the email address matches based off of that URL parameter, and we can even test this, so it's going to pull back that JSON, and you can see this pulls back my contact information. If that contact matches, we're going to pull that back in here. But then what we can do is we can personalize that form. So now it can actually say, hi, Dan, because when we prefetch that, let's pull an example. We can pull any of that information from a contact record. So this is grabbing another record to personalize the experience inside of Fillout. We can link this back to Dan's contact record. So I think, Philip, that kind of goes back to the other use case you were asking about too, of like a form submission, link it to the contact. You could use today's value to pre-populate this field here. And then a phone number, this pulls from my contact record too, because why type it in again? Now, of course, if it's a different phone number to reach me at, because we got to fix this, I can re-enter it and update that phone number. But this is the beauty of prefetch, is we can take data that already exists inside of Airtable, pull it in. It's kind of like if you do a lot with Airtable automations and you use the find records step. So you find existing records and then use that data and plug it in your automation. Same idea here, but instead you've got the form.
That's interesting with the phone number. Is there a way to say, because like, let's say I want you to call me at a new number, but I don't want to overwrite the old record, but I want to capture it separately. Is that possible? I guess you could pre-populate a new field with the old thing. And it's like, for this call me at this, and that's associated. But you could also overwrite it without overwriting the actual field, right?
Yes. So that's exactly what we're doing in this scenario, because this is a brand new field for the phone number for the work order. But what I'm saying is, for the default value, we're going into our contact record, we're grabbing the phone number. So it's going to display here. If you update this, and then back inside of Airtable, this is going to populate the phone number for that work order. So it won't change your main phone number, but it's specifically saying, hey, when the guy's on site and he's going to fix whatever, he's going to call the number here. If you didn't change it, it's going to pull that information from your contact record. If you did change it, here's the value to use.
Cool. Very cool.
Well, that's it, I think, in terms of the use cases that I'm going to show today. We've got a lot more just like this. So if this is getting your mind just exploding, sign up for that free course that we have on Fillout, because these are some of the same examples that we're talking about in there.
100%. Let me share it back in the chat, actually. So highly recommended. We do have some questions here in the chat. One of them I saw a while back was referring to AI, obviously. Are you going to demo the new AI tool? I don't know.
I wasn't planning on it for today, but yes, they do have an AI tool to be able to essentially create the field. So if you're like, this is a contact form, it's going to construct the fields for that. So not going to share that today, but it is pretty cool. Depending on your use case, if you're building a lot of forms, I could see that being really helpful.
100%. A comment from Benjamin here. I love that you can bring back info when you link to a linked record and show it in the form as a live feedback. And then Jared had something else here for us.
Yeah, Jared wanted to know about the multiple. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know that you could link records with having them hidden in the form?
Yep. And that's actually, let's see what we're doing here. So when we use that URL parameter, I'd say that's a really common case. Like if we had that customer portal in Softer and it passes that email address and we look up that contact record, you don't want the user to choose from contact records, right? You don't want them to expose that information out in the system. So what we did here is we populate it with the record ID that we prefetched, but then we have it hidden always so that the user never sees it. They don't have to worry about it. They're not going to mess around and choose from other contacts. But the data that we get back in the database then still links to that contact record. So,
you know what I find frustrating about that hidden always button is it doesn't always show up. You've got to say hide it on logic and then it pops up as an option. Is that true for you too? Like if you go to a field that's not hidden right now, right? So say date started, right? Yeah. And you go to logic. Oh, wow, it is there for you. Wow.
You have to get it in the super Fillout settings. Once you do your own webinar and Fillout, then you get
that. Maybe they hook you up, or maybe I just like my eye just goes right to hide when. That's good to know. The hide always is there. So that was user error on my end. I think Jared had a question around multiple tables or multiple objects or updating multiple records.
Yeah.
So I've got an issue there too, because like, and Jared, maybe this is like coming from our conversation. Like we were talking to Jared about this the other day, where he was like bragging about how awesome Fillout was and got us to use it.
I can see you budding up here. I can see this buddy mode right now.
but the question is, right? Like, okay, so today, right? We have right now. It seems like one Fillout form can connect to one table. But what happens if I want to update records on multiple tables from one form? Is that even possible?
I don't think it's possible to, like, if you're actually doing two update actions, I don't think that's possible today. So if we had this work order and we said we want to like update an existing work order, and then we want to go and update Dan's phone number on the actual contact record.
Right.
I don't think so. I could see that being like a pretty easy feature for them to add. And granted, I'm not from the Fillout team, so I could be speaking out of turn here. But, I think that this is something that like they've got all the data there. You could collect information, you could pass it through to a linked record, but I don't think you've got the ability to do like two simultaneous updates. So me with my partner brain on here would probably say like collect the information that you need and then coupled with an Airtable automation on the back end post submission, then you could have the main update that happens on your work order. And then you could have that field update to trigger the update of the link contact.
So make sure you have the submission ID as a pass field to be able to link that up. But yes, 100%. That's how I'm doing it today, right? Is I'm just doing it via Zapier. But yeah, same thing, same idea. That's cool.
We had an interesting comment from Benjamin again here. So many big brands don't even give this level of interaction when you're filling out forms with them. This is a huge way to stand out as a business. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, well, both from the standpoint, so is this more from Fillout as a company, or is this more being able, what you as a business can provide to your end users?
I guess more like as a business, like if you were to adopt Fillout to really stand out as a best practice.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we we have so many clients that are like, oh, we have this issue, you know, we're on site with a customer, so we use, you know, Field View or like some totally different forms tool. We love Airtable and what we're doing, but we have to use some other kind of forms tool to be able to do it. And now we're able to build just like crazy use cases that would normally take 2-3 tools to put together. And Fillout feels like it's just this natural extension of Airtable, you know, and now they're connecting with SmartSuite and Notion and others as well. You feel like you're right at home. Yeah, it's 2 different tools, but you know, Philip, to your point, like it's way different than Google Forms, and then you got to rebuild it and reconnect everything.
Rebuild it. And I think it's the best of both worlds, right? In that it's giving you that native integration and that native, you know, it can fetch data, it can update your options, right? It can keep those things in sync. But also, unlike Airtable, where for every field on a form, there might be a correlated field on the data table, you actually don't need that. There's that other tab where you can add other fields that are not on there at all and can be used for totally different things and send data to different places. Like that's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Because I don't want everything on my data table. Like, yeah. So
yeah,
all the time.
In terms of integrations, we did have a question coming in through our form from Robert Natson. How do we integrate with other tools?
Yeah. So to be honest, most of the stuff we've done is with the native integrations that are supported. And then what we'll typically do is like, if you have Fillout to Airtable, now the data is in Airtable, and we could use that to trigger something via Make or Zapier to another system. You know, they do have a webhook available, so I think you can have it interact with other tools, but you're not going to get a lot of the same secret sauce of kind of that native feeling between things. So I would say, I think it should be feasible to be able to take Fillout and then have it write a record to someplace else, but it's not going to be the same probably on the prefetching and some of those other more advanced concepts that we talked about.
Amazing, amazing. I don't see any more questions coming up. So I guess for our community's sake, because I know that most, if not all of our community members work in operations, how would you integrate Fillout in a day-to-day kind of operational role?
Yeah, in a day-to-day operational role, I mean, I think we're probably all of the same opinion that like structured data is where you want to be with your organization. And, you know, we do this for like internal kinds of project tracking, right? You want to have a project intake form. You want to collect information. We were working with an events company where they have, you know, they put on like huge corporate events. And so they have so many steps in their process, like interact with the vendors. And now we have to set up purchasing. And now we have to interact with the client of what we're doing. And being able to have forms. So for them, we were trying to use Airtable forms natively, but to be able to just have like basically a single record and everything gets written to the database, super tough. I think this ability to have those linked records, so you could say, set up a project intake form, link to the 3 points of contact for this, choose the vendors that you're going to do X, Y, and Z with. I think those kind of things make this so operationally more efficient. Plus, you're stripping down a lot of the, you know, it's kind of like the idea with like Airtable interfaces. You're stripping out the noise of being in, you know, a grid view and interacting with the database and setting up a UI that makes sense for the users themselves.
Fantastic. And speaking of Airtable interfaces, that's going to be our next topic for our NoCodeOps Live community show, which is not going to happen next week, but the one after. So next week we won't be here, but the one after for sure, tune in if you want to learn about Airtable interfaces. So Dan, I guess we're heading towards the end of our event today. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Absolutely loved this walkthrough of Fillout. It definitely lived up to our expectations. It was fantastic to hear. And I'm sure that many people will start implementing that into their operations as well. And I'm sure we will as well. I knew that Phil was so excited to join this conversation today. I think I couldn't resist. I had a text from him yesterday, like my 5 a.m. He was like, "Oh, Fillout." It's like, oh.
I was literally in the middle of it last night. Dan, let me just say, man, like, I know you were here talking about Fillout and Airtable, right? But like, you know, major props to you for just like being able to explain this stuff really well and teach it. because as someone who is a consultant and a freelancer working with companies where you're embedding yourself and learning processes and having to teach them back to folks after you build them, that's such an incredible skill that you have. That like if anyone's out there thinking about, hey, I want to bring somebody in to help me build this thing out, for consulting or for project based, like working with someone like Dan that really explain this stuff to you in a way that you can then transfer it to your own knowledge and like learn it on your own and learn the fundamentals. That's a really amazing skill. So Dan, just so cool.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
It's the teaching power.
Yeah.
Teachers in no code.
Yeah.
Teacher skills. And everyone else, if you're not part of our community and you would like to hang out with us, because we're awesome, as you can clearly see, join our community at NoCodeOps.com. You get to hang out and to take part into these fantastic events. And I saw in the chat as well, people are very grateful to have this kind of free educational content every week. So always let us know what you would be interested into learning more, and we can get that sorted for you. Phil, Dan, thank you so much for being here with us today, and I will see you next time. Have a fantastic evening, everyone, or day, wherever you are in the world.
See y'all.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Oops. And that's it.